Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and Chinu Patel sent a tweet to me that really rung true with me around my house here. This is something that I'm dealing with right now that a lot of you married men out there are dealing with because of current events. We are spending a lot more time around the house with our children and our wives. We all know this. Well, Chinu Patel sent me this tweet from XRP Junkie. Condolences to all those poor married men who've spent months telling the wife, I'll do that when I get some time. And unfortunately, now we have some time, and my wife is literally walking around this house and just staring at things, thinking of things to do that I am out of excuses on. And I'm sure that many of you are going through the same thing. And so I'm sorry that you're having to go through it, but just know that the digital asset investor is going through it as well. We are out of excuses. We are now home. What do they call it? Something in place, staying in place, or whatever they call it. But we are home, and now we have to fix things. I am starting, my wife made me order air filters, and I'm replacing air filters today. She's already staring at trees in the backyard about, oh, that tree needs to be cut down. And I'm at least able to make an excuse on that and say, well, I can't have tree guys here right now during all this. But anyway, we're all going through this together. All right. So first, I wanted to show you this, and this is what I'm staring at the television watching this. And none of this makes any sense to me. This is what I tweeted today. The U.S. economy is completely shut down, which will cause untold job losses. The U.S. government promises to bail out the people and businesses that remain shut down with $6 trillion that the government does not have. We're in $23 trillion of debt. And then third, the stock market surges as if this is good news. This is a crazy upside down world we live in now, folks. I'm telling you, there's only one place that this can end, and that is in a global reset, because the U.S. is bankrupt and all the other central banks of the world are bankrupt as well, and everybody knows it. There has to be a plan to do a global reset in this scenario. I believe they had a plan like this that was to be initiated at the next global crisis, and we happen to be in one. All right. Synod sent me this, which I thought was interesting. All of a sudden, when the digital dollar came up as a topic this week, when Congress had put that into a bill, this Chris Giancarlo, he started this digital dollar project, I believe, back maybe 6 months ago or so. But he has all of a sudden surfaced and wants to talk about his digital dollar project. Digital Dollar Project recently held its first virtual meeting with this extraordinary advisory board. Recent congressional exploration of digital dollar highlights importance of upgrading architecture of USD for a digital 21st century. And his website is Digital Dollar Project. So I decided I would go and take a look. First, this is the article that the tweet linked to. Digital Dollar Project names 22 new advisory group members, and he's got some of the members that have been added here. And then it shows that Accenture is backing the project. But before I get there, I want to show you this. Let's see. I think it's down here. Charles Giancarlo, this is his brother. Okay, his brother is the CEO of Pure Storage and formerly served as senior executive roles at Cisco Systems and Silver Lake Partners. Remember that name. You may remember it just by my mentioning it. This is his brother Charles. This is Chris that's running this thing. Chris Giancarlo ran the CFTC. CFTC is the same organization that regulates the CME Group, which is an investor in Ripple. All right. Then his brother over here was at Silver Lake Partners. Okay. And we can see that he's one of the advisors now at Silver Lake Partners. That's him right there. And Silver Lake Partners, if you remember, and by the way, before I move along, I want to mention to you, the project partners are Accenture and Digital Dollar Foundation and FTI Consulting. Accenture is an investor in Ripple as well. But let's go back up to this. So he's his brother that is involved in this as well. It used to be at Silver Lake Partners. And Silver Lake Partners was, of course, founded by Glenn Hutchins, who's on the board at Digital Currency Group, which also is one of the first investors in Ripple and in Coinbase, as well as just about every major blockchain firm that you can name. Now, I want to go, someone mentioned something to me that I wanted to bring up. This right here, if you look at the Digital Currency Group, this is just an aside right here I wanted to show you. They've got here, it says the epicenter of the Bitcoin and blockchain industry. And I believe that's a pretty good description. I believe Digital Currency Group is at the epicenter of all of this. And I believe that in turn, Barry Silbert, as well as the guys on his board, are at the epicenter. I think Glenn Hutchins is at the epicenter, and I think Larry Summers is at the epicenter of blockchain. And I've always felt like that. Okay, moving along, Sergeant Obi-Wan sent me a Galgatron tweet that I loved, and I think he's dead on it right here. And you should all pay close attention. I can see the low price of XRP starting to erode confidence in Ripple's use case. Not on the part of the digital asset investor, by the way. He says, it's easy to see failure where there is none. You're allowing your disappointment in your investment to cloud your judgment. Try to keep in focus that all coins are hurting and that nothing about Ripple or ODL's use case has changed. Remember, the price isn't real. This is what I want to highlight more than anything. Remember, or as Glenn, he says, remember, the price isn't real. And Glenn Hutchins from Digital Currency Group himself said the values in the protocol, the price that you see on he was pointing to like the coin market caps, it's all a distraction. And then Galgatron says, and the true value of XRP remains as strong as ever. I know price is all that matters to some of you, understandably so, but you'll make yourself crazy trying to rationalize a random number. And believe you me, it is a random number. But remember, the price isn't real. The XRP price is not real. And I can just give you one thing off the top of my head that I can tell you for 1,000% sure it's not real. What you see on CoinMarketCap does not factor in probably the most important digital asset exchange that has XRP on it, does not factor in the prices of SBI virtual currencies in Japan. It does not factor those prices in. How can you have a real price? But that's not really what I think is being said here. And now I'm not putting words in his mouth. These are my words. The price isn't real to me means much bigger things than that. The price that you see on these things does not really incorporate the utility of XRP, which is what it's all about. And I believe when the utility really happens, it's going to blow the doors off of many people out there. Okay, and it could happen a lot faster than you think. Okay, how about this? This is from, I don't know how to even say the name of this, at REB0RN13. This is a video from Brad Garlinghouse, and then I'm going to play this, a 12-second clip, and I want you to look at the look on her face. She knows something when she says this. Now, and I'm going to play you a clip from Julia Chatterley. This is the lady from CNN who is very smart. She's very savvy, and I've said in a tweet before, I believe that she knows what's going on. She's had she smells what Ripple is cooking, is what I said to be exact. She has had Brad Garlinghouse on her show twice. She's had the MoneyGram CEO on once, and she asks questions like she already knows the answer and wants to make him uncomfortable. Watch her face as she says this 12-second clip.
A lot of sense. But what about you for Ripple building a platform that could perhaps substitute XRP for a Fed coin one day, or
when we think about
other
the XRP?
Look at the look on her face. If that lady does not know something, I don't know who does. And then they followed this underneath with Catherine Coley, who used to head up XRP liquidity, when she, in the recent thing that we talked about, the U.S. should use stable coins for emergency, you know what payments, the word I can't say. So keep your eye on Julia Chatterley. That's all I'm saying. And I'm going to show you a video at the end of this where you can tell even more that she knows something. All right, moving along. Sean Michael sent me this. This is a great tweet from Michael Arrington. Why isn't buy more XRP and Bitcoin one of the choices? And this is a tweet that he's referencing. If you receive a check from the stimulus but don't need the money, what do you plan to do with it? Save it is what most people plan to do with it. And so, with regard to this stimulus, they say that if you make over 75,000, that you don't get anything. Well, I want you to think about this scenario for a second. And this is how crazy all this is. What if you're a person that makes, let's say, that you make 100,000? Well, you have been, as someone who makes $100,000 a year, your job has been shut down like everybody else across the world. Okay? You have lost your income in most cases, like everybody has in the United States. And so what they're saying is that if in the past, in other words, let's say last year you made 100,000, I think they're measuring it in 2018 at your tax return. If you made $100,000 in 2018, you get nothing. And yet, this is my understanding, and yet you get nothing, but your income has come to a stop, let's say, but you get nothing. So the assumption there is that because you made $100,000 in 2018, that somehow you're okay. Well, what if you're someone who made $100,000 in 2018, but you don't save your money or you haven't saved anything? So what do you do then? Then all you can do is just stop paying your bill. This is a disaster, folks. And a government is not going to save you. Government is not going to save you unless they have a plan for a reset of some sort.
My apologies.
Which
I couldn't hear what you said.
my watch accidentally went off. I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, my point is that the government is not fixing anything. Their only choice here is to reset the world. And I think there's a plan somewhere to do it. Okay. Now, moving along, XRP vet Diamonds to the Sky sent me this. As we know, the feds were talking about how they were going to have there would be apps where people could more or less be airdropped some type of digital dollar in this scenario, and whoever doesn't have that will be sent checks. Well, in a timely fashion. Now, I'm not saying that Bakkt is going to be the app. In fact, they said they're releasing it in the summer, and I'll show you that. But they put this tweet out yesterday at 8:00 p.m. So they said Bakkt's mobile app is a critical step forward in helping bolster the versatility and credibility of crypto and digital assets as legitimate financial tools. And so they're highlighting their app right in the middle of what they know is this crisis where it is starting to be talked about, the idea of having an app. I don't think any of this is by coincidence, but I did want to show you, this is the digital asset wallet. I wanted to show you, they say in summer 2020 is when they plan to launch this app. So apparently summer 2020, now, do they speed that up and get involved in being a part of this? Who knows? I don't think that's what this is. And then also, they had this where they've got on their, I believe this is on their website, where you can take a look at what this app is going to look like. And it's got their digital wallet, and then you can go down and say they're going to have loyalty points on it, crypto trading, and all this different stuff. Now, this was a tweet where they pointed something out I didn't know. Thor's Hammer said, did anyone see Bakkt is using the phrase on-demand liquidity on the new app? And right here, he circled it, on-demand liquidity, the portfolio tool you can see after linking your digital asset accounts converted all to cash using the Bakkt app instantly. That's right, cash in real time. So this makes you wonder if XRP is going to be on the app. All right. Now, Michael at VAL5 links. And this all kind of goes together, folks. This is Michael at VAL. 5 links there here. The 1 month and 3 month Treasury bill yields turn negative Wednesday. All right. So we're getting negative interest rates. Now, I've shown you articles on this channel before from the IMF where they talk about how we could basically turn interest rates negative and get away with it, is basically what they said in the article. And it involved digital assets. So watch this clip. I may have played for you this clip before, but I'm going to play it again because the world is at the point of negative interest rates, even more so with all this money printing that's going on. Well, watch this clip. This is a guy from the Brookings Institution. Watch this. This is from November 19th, 2018. Listen to what he says.
First, for central banking getting into cryptocurrency of some kind.
At one level, it's going to mean that central banks remain in the game. If you look at certain economies like Sweden, where the use of cash is very fast disappearing, central banks may have very little role to play both in terms of wholesale as well as retail payment systems. So this would keep central banks in the business of creating money, although most money in modern economies is really created by commercial rather than central banks. In addition, having a central bank digital currency would put a crimp on illegal activity that is intermediated to cash, bring a lot more activities into the tax net, and it would also make monetary policy at one level somewhat easier to implement. If we all had deposit accounts with the Federal Reserve, which would be one way of having electronic money, the Fed would be able to impose negative nominal interest rates, which it couldn't do during the financial crisis. So there is a lot to be said for having a central bank digital currency, although as you're suggesting, there are some negatives as well.
Yeah, let's get to the negatives. So outline what the risks, some of them are obvious, but outline what some of the risks.
So one of the issues is that I could no longer buy you a cup of coffee without either a private agent or the government knowing about it. And there is certainly a question about whether we should have at least some privacy in our financial dealings without the government, without private parties being able to see them. There is also the potential for some degree of instability. If you do have central banks issuing currencies, it could take commercial banks out of the game in terms of retail payments, and commercial banks are still very important in terms of modern financial systems. So it could create some degree of instability, and we still don't know how it's going to work if you were to have a digital currency, how that would work in terms of the transmission and indeed implementation of monetary policy. It's easy to think about how it would all work much more efficiently, but there are potential bottlenecks that could be created. Then, of course, there is a big risk of hacking. We've seen even very secure systems come to be vulnerable to hacking, and the same could be true of central bank digital currency.
What area of the world where we might see this first explosion of central banks really using this in some kind of capacity?
Now, here is the interesting thing. The big advanced economy central banks of the Eurozone, the Bank of Japan, the Fed, all seem to be taking a somewhat step-back approach to this. But it's small advanced economies such as Sweden, for instance, Singapore, and many emerging market economies, including China, but also India, that are taking a serious look at this. In the small advanced economies, it's essentially because the central banks want to remain part of the game and make sure that they have control over the financial system. In the emerging market economies, there are many big advantages because the financial system right now does not work very well. Financial inclusion is an important criterion, and digital currencies intermediated through mobile technologies could work quite effectively.
But the issue with that was that do those kind of countries have the monetary policy and governmental support to then handle the issues that might come with using a cryptocurrency and monetary policy?
So in a country like Sweden, the answer is probably yes. Sweden is very far ahead of most other countries in its thinking, and that's partly because the use of cash is almost ended there. Right now, the share of currency, banknotes and coins in the overall M2 monetary aggregate is down to about 2 to 3%, and it's very fast vanishing. Sweden can manage it. It's a legitimate question whether China, for instance, has the technical infrastructure and also the sort of government institutions regulations that are necessary to support a central bank digital currency. But they certainly don't want to be left behind, and all of these countries are moving forward to see if they can harness this technology in a way that would benefit them and their citizens.
I'm glad you brought up China, because I can't talk to you without asking about China-U.S. trade relations. The APEC summit over the weekend that ended in real tense words between President Xi and Vice President Michael Pence. What would
Okay, well, I wanted to show you that, but earlier in the video, you'll notice that he said that digital assets would help when they wanted to go to negative interest rates, because once you're in that system, they can impose negative interest rates easily, and that, I believe, is a part of the whole plan. Okay. Brad, I wanted to show you this tweet from yesterday, just so you're aware of it. Brad Garlinghouse tweeted this: "Enough is enough. In a time of global crisis, when people are especially vulnerable, social platforms need to hold scammers, crypto in other words, accountable for stealing money from innocent victims with fake giveaways." And what he's pointing to is there are many, this is one of the guys from SPQR had tweeted this out. There are people, and what they do is they'll go onto YouTube and they'll do a live stream, and they'll put someone's face and make it look like it's Ripple or Brad Garlinghouse doing an XRP giveaway. But the point is, don't ever send anybody on any of these things your XRP or your Ethereum or anything else, because they're not going to send you anything back. It's a scam. So Brad Garlinghouse was wanting to bring light to that. Now, I thought this was an interesting tweet here. The jig is up. Powell looked scared, masking far greater economic problem. Watch this video with Powell.
The Federal Reserve doesn't exactly print money, but as one writer put it, you do have the ability to conjure money out of thin air. My question to you is simple. Is there any limit to the amount of money the Fed is willing to put into this economy to keep it afloat? Is it a blank check?
Savannah, we, in certain circumstances like the present, we do have the ability to essentially use our emergency lending authorities. And the only limit on that will be how much backstop we get from the Treasury Department. We're required to get full security for our loans so that we don't lose money. And so the Treasury puts up money as we estimate what the losses might be. But essentially, the answer to your question, though, is no. We can continue to make loans, and really the point of all that is to support the flow of credit in the economy to households and businesses.
But, so you're saying, no, it's not a blank check, but yes, you're prepared to spend an unprecedented amount.
We certainly are. It's not a blank check in the sense that we are limited by the ability to take losses, but I would say that the number, effectively $1 of loss absorption of backstop from Treasury is enough to support $10 worth of loans. So really, the answer is what's happened is all over the world, investors have pulled back to very less risky things. That's understandable. But what that's meant is that many places in the capital markets which support borrowing by households and businesses, I'm talking about mortgages and car loans and things like that, have just stopped working. So we can step in and replace that lending under our emergency lending powers, and we will do that. We will look wherever there is in the capital markets where credit is not flowing. We have the ability in this unique circumstance to temporarily step in and provide those loans, and we will keep doing that aggressively and forthrightly as we have been.
What?
So there you go. They're going to keep hitting the print button as much as they have to do. Okay, Big Skinny sent me this, and this is another video that I thought was great from Citizen XRP. Let's play this one. This is from Steve Mnuchin yesterday.
These are SBA loans, but the Treasury will be issuing new regulations authorizing almost every single FDIC-insured bank to make these. I expect by the end of next week, we will have a very simple process where these can be made and dispersed in the same day. So this will be a very simple system to get money into small business hands.
Same day disbursements. That's interesting. Okay, now I want to give you a caveat before I show you what I'm about to show you. I am not showing you this because I think that what's going on now was somehow created by someone or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just showing it to you because it was fascinating to me that the forward thinking and that people were actually wargaming these things ahead of time. And I think you'll find it fascinating too. This is from Tolip XUL, sent me a couple of videos. These were, one was called Event 101. And what this is a crisis simulation, just like what I showed you with the digital currency wars. But this is a crisis simulation where if we had an event similar to what's going on now, and this is done by, what's interesting is, it's done by the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It was done in October 18th, 2019 in New York. And you can actually go and watch these, and it's a simulation. What if something like what's happening right now went on and we had a current event such as the one we're going through? The word I can't say. And this is part 2 of it. This one, it says Event 201, and you can see all of that. So, and then I wanted to follow that with showing you another fascinating thing that was brought to my attention, which is this. Trump's top, doctor called for health emergency fund back in 2017, warned that U.S. would face a surprise outbreak. Look at this. This is from Newsweek. Says, Dr. Anthony, now this is the same guy that every day right now while you're watching Trump do these press conferences, this is the same doctor that's stepping to the podium and talking about the current situation. Dr. Anthony Fauci, or however you say his name, a leading health expert and member of President Donald Trump's task force, predicted 3 years ago that the administration would have to deal with a surprise The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases told a Georgetown University event on this preparedness in January 2017, there was no doubt President Trump's team would face these types of challenges. And he wanted the creation of an emergency fund. So I just thought that was pretty fascinating that these people were already preparing for this type of thing before this. All right, now Cryptopolis. Let's get into something interesting here. This gets pretty darn interesting right here. Cryptopolis, he says that he's got an article that he's linking to here by Jim Rickard, and I don't normally read whole entire articles, but I'm going to do this one because it's that good. But a quote here: we can expect that the dollar will be devalued by 50 to 80% in the coming years. A devaluation of this magnitude will wipe out the value of your life savings. Here's the article: get ready for world money. Since Federal Reserve, this is written yesterday, since Federal Reserve resources were barely able to prevent complete collapse in 2008, it should be expected that an even larger collapse will overwhelm the Fed's balance sheet. That's exactly the situation we're facing right now. The specter of a global debt crisis suggests the urgency for new liquidity sources, bigger than those that central banks can provide. The logic leads quickly to one currency for the planet. The task of reliquefying the world will fall to the IMF because the IMF will have the only clean balance sheet left among financial institutions. The IMF will rise to the occasion with a towering issuance of special drawing rights. And this monetary operation will effectively end the dollar's role as the leading reserve currency. The Federal Reserve has a printing press. They can print dollars. The IMF also has a printing press and can print SDRs. It's just world money that could be handed out. The IMF could function like a central bank through more frequent issuances of SDRs and by encouraging use of private SDRs by banks and borrowers. What exactly is an SDR? The SDR is a form of world money printed by the IMF. It was created in 1969 as the realization of an earlier idea of world money called the Bancor, proposed by John Maynard Keynes at Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. The Bancor was never adopted, but the SDR has been going strong for 50 years. I am often asked, if I had 100 SDRs, how many dollars would that be worth? How many euros would that be worth? There's a formula for determining that. And as of today, there are 5 countries in the formula: dollars, sterling, yen, euros, and yuan. Those are the 5 currencies that comprise the SDR calculation. The important thing to realize that the SDR is the source of potentially unlimited global liquidity. That's why SDRs were invented in 1969 when the world was seeking alternatives to the dollar. And that's why they will be used in the imminent future. At the previous rate of progress, it may have taken decades for the SDR to pose a serious challenge to the dollar. But as I've said for years, that process could be rapidly accelerated in a financial crisis where the world needed liquidity and the central banks were unable to provide it because they still have not normalized their balance sheets from the last crisis. In that case, I've argued previously, the replacement of the dollar could happen almost overnight. Well, guess what? We're facing a global financial crisis worse even than 2008. That's because each crisis is larger than the previous one. The reason has to do with the system scale. In complex dynamic systems such as capital markets, risk is an exponential function of system scale. Increasing market scale correlates the exponentially larger market collapses. This means market panic far larger than the panic of 2008. SDRs have been used before. They were issued in several tranches during the monetary turmoil between 71 and 81 before they were put back on the shelf. In 2009, also in time of financial crisis, a new issue of SDRs was distributed to IMF members to provide liquidity after the panic of 2008. The 2009 issuance was a case of the IMF testing the plumbing of the system to make sure it worked properly. With no issuance of SDRs for 28 years, from 1981 to 2009, the IMF wanted to rehearse the governance, computational, and legal processes for issuing SDRs. The purpose was partly to alleviate liquidity concerns at the time, but also partly to make sure the system works in case a large new issuance was needed on short notice. The 2009 experience showed the system worked fine. Since 2009, the IMF has proceeded to slow steps to create a platform for massive new issuances of SDRs and the creation of a deep liquid pool of SDR-denominated assets. Folks, do you hear what's being said? Now, let's keep going with it. This is same guy, James Rickards, and this is from Ram Coab.
The fact that the 5 largest banks in America have a higher percentage of total banking assets than they did in 2008, so there's more concentration. That's another risk factor. Taking that all into account, you can say that the next crisis will be exponentially worse than the last one. That's an objective statement based on complexity theory. So you either have to believe that we're never going to have a crisis, and I'm like, well, you had one in 1987, you had one in 1994, you had one in 1998, you had the dot-com crash in 2000, mortgage crash in 2007, Lehman in 2008. Don't tell me these things don't happen. They happen every 5, 6, 7 years. It's been 10 years since the last one. Doesn't mean it happens tomorrow, but nobody should be surprised if it does. So the point is, this crisis is coming because they always come, and it'll be exponentially worse because of the scaling metrics I mentioned. Who's ready for that? Well, the central banks aren't ready. In 1998, Wall Street bailed out a hedge fund, long-term capital. In 2008, the central banks bailed out Wall Street, Lehman, but Morgan Stanley was ready to fail, Goldman was ready to fail, et cetera. In 2018, 2019, sooner than later, who's going to bail out the central banks? The problem has never gone away. We just get bigger bailouts at a higher level. What's bigger than the central banks? Who can bail out the central banks? There's only one institution, one balance sheet in the world that can do that, which is the IMF. The IMF actually prints their own money. The SDR, the special drawing right. SDR is not strawberry daiquiri on the rocks. It's a special drawing right. It's world money. That's the easiest way to think about it. They do have a printing press.
They do have a printing press. And you know what else they do? The IMF has been working with fintech companies. They've got an advisory board that's comprised of people from Circle, Ripple, the digital asset holdings. They've been working on this since the financial crisis, folks. And in the prior article that I just read to you, he said that they tested their SDR system in the financial crisis, right after the financial crisis of 2008. Well, I propose to you that since that time, they've tested digital assets and they've been doing testing with fintech, people like Ripple, okay? You see where this is going, folks? I believe that they're fully prepared to deal with this. Well, let's keep going. Now, I've talked a lot about Jim Rickards. I've even read you excerpts from his books. He's talked a lot about the SDRs. One thing I've never heard him talk about in relation to, he talks to all these people behind the scenes. This guy's well connected. He knows this is where this is going. But the one thing I've never heard him talk about is how crypto might be involved until I saw this clip right here. What I'm about to play for you is a clip from Jim Rickards where he's doing an actual presentation with a slideshow, and watch what he says here at the end.
General McMaster said,
wait a minute, let me refresh this so that we can get this going right. It's right in here.
They have all said the same thing. North Korea cannot have these weapons, period. There's no debate. General McMaster said acceptance is unacceptable. And yet North Korea is going for these weapons, so therefore we're heading for a war. I think you all know what that'll do to the price of gold. Look for the IMF to maybe have a crypto SDR on a permissioned hyperledger. And again, the BRICS are about on the brink of getting veto power in the IMF, so the IMF will not be able to bail out the world unless they say so, and their price might be the end of the dollar as the global reserve currency. Here's my personal portfolio. If you IMF to maybe have a crypto.
Let's go back to here. He just laid it out for you right there, folks. This is the first time I've ever seen him say it's going to be a crypto SDR possible. He knows. Now, in this same video, he says point blank that it's not Ethereum and it's not Bitcoin. He said there are some that I would recommend to you. In other words, he, as well as everybody else in this whole equation, will not say Ripple and will not say XRP, but it's the only one that makes sense in this scenario. But more importantly, zero in here. He says, he gets very specific here. IMF promoting a new world money called the special drawing right, permissioned Hyperledger Fabric version 1.0, which was released in July 2017. Linux Foundation, a new gold-backed currency, it's a gold-backed SDR. A crypto SDR is possible. What? Hyperledger Fabric, where have we seen Hyperledger Fabric version 1. Where have we seen Hyperledger anything? All of a sudden out of nowhere, this guy's saying Hyperledger Fabric. Well, I know where we've seen it. You remember this little chart from the Everest Group, blockchain technology adoption. They show you the adoption of how the internet came about. And then they show you to the internet of value. ILP between 2017. Now look, Hyperledger right here. And go back to his slide. Hyperledger Fabric released July 2017. Hyperledger created, and he shows this 2017 to 2000. Let's see. No, this is back in 2015. But then you've got Fabric right here, folks. He knows. He knows all about what's about to happen, folks. He knows. Jim Rickards knows. And look at this. Hyperledger. Not just Hyperledger, but Fabric. Hyperledger is written here. Fabric's here. The only thing that's not mentioned is Ripple or XRP or Interledger Protocol. But Jim Rickards knows, and I didn't really know that he knew until I saw this slide right here. But Jim Rickards knows exactly what's about to happen. Okay, now let's show you something Christine Lagarde said.
System at large in many, many countries. The difference will not be between those who are disrupted and those who survive, but it will be between those who are cannibalized because they are not seeing it coming and they're not embracing it, and those who self-induce that cannibalization. And I'm using cannibalization on purpose because it's a bit of a striking, horrible word. But it's really what it means. It's you're going to disrupt your business model, you're going to change it, you're going to reduce your cost, you're going to expedite your transactions, and you're going to continue to inspire confidence because you will build that on the basis of an existing backbone, which is your bank and the confidence relationship that you've established with your customers. So that's where I see changes happening now. If you think of Circle and Ripples and all those, that's where they are active and helpful.
There you go. Now, I'm going to finish this up by showing you this. This is a joint statement The International Monetary Fund, Joint Statement, World Bank Group, and IMF call to action on debt of IDA countries. They're talking about with immediate effect. They want to the World Bank with the IMF call on all official bilateral creditors to suspend debt payments from IDA countries that request forbearance. This will help the IDA countries' immediate liquidity needs to tackle challenges posed by this, the word I can't say, And then, they said in here that they're going to have their virtual spring meetings. There's no telling what goes down in these meetings. And finally, I want to end with a video that Brad Combs brought to my attention. And this is a video from Julia Chatterley. I told you, remember, Julia Chatterley is she gets it. She knows what's going on with all this, and she's going to be famous from all of this because she knows something. I'm telling you, she does. Listen up.
World's poorest. The World Bank and the IMF want to suspend all debt payments by 76 developing nations immediately. And they want the G20 on board. The leaders of the world's biggest economies have been meeting in an emergency virtual summit over the past hour. John Defterios joins me now. John, it's something I've been calling for in individual nations. And here in the United States, we've seen it sporadically in states. We haven't seen a blanket. You were way ahead of the curve here, though, for emerging market nations and said there needs to be a fund because on a health perspective, on a financial perspective, they're going to struggle more than anyone.
Clearly, that is the case, Julie. I think it's vital, personally, looking at from this viewpoint from the Middle East, looking south, for example, into Africa. I have to say, for this G20 meeting, it's supposed to last 75 minutes, and they've been at it about 40 minutes. That's quite an agenda for what is on the table here. I think the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said it extremely well. He said it is a global health threat from the global south that will affect everybody. So we have to rally to the cause. He, for example, is trying to start a $2 billion fund for urgent medicines and equipment going into these developing countries. And when you talk about the lending from the IMF and the World Bank, it's less than $100 billion. To me, that seems like small beer, knowing that there's been better than $4 trillion from the G7 plus China going into their economies. The debt relief, they have about $40 billion on the table. They're looking to freeze that debt for about $15 billion. So again, it's not a lot of money here. These are small economies, but it is essential for it to happen. We talk about 76 countries. It's a quarter of the population. And we've talked about these countries earlier in the week when we raised this issue. Nigeria and Pakistan, about 400 million people. That's bigger than the United States. So you can see the challenge around the corner for a country that doesn't have the money to inject at this stage.
You know, a lot of these nations as well are big oil exporters, so it's a double whammy of the revenue hit on that side. I can't help but just put two and two together here and perhaps make five, but you do have some of the biggest players, the Mike Pompeos, MBS, of course, from Saudi Arabia. What hopes of perhaps coming to some agreement here that could be one thing that could add a little bit of underpinning and support to the fears at this moment?
Well, we're seeing that price war still play out here. Vladimir Putin, before the G20 summit started, said this is not a venue to discuss the price war. That did not stop Mike Pompeo, though, the Secretary of State. He challenged Mohammed bin Salman, saying, look, you're the crown prince, a rising leader in the country, the chair of the G20. You kind of need to rise to the occasion here and look at the damage from the price war. And then again, he had a phone call with the crown prince here of Abu Dhabi. As you and I have talked about before, the UAE was involved in this price war as well, adding 1 million barrels a day. And the problem we have, Julia, they're adding 4 million barrels a day in April, right? We have demand destruction of 15 million barrels. So we're looking at nearly 20% of global demand collapsing right now. So even if they had an agreement, I can't see a huge rise in oil prices. But fair point by Pompeo. This is not the time for the price war. Saudi Arabia and Russia think.
I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe and hit the like button and tell your friends and family that we're talking about all of the money. Thank you for listening.